welcome to the FiftyForward Exchange. My name is Gretchen Funk and I am the Chief Program Officer at FiftyForward. FiftyForward's mission is to support, champion, and enhance life for adults 50 and over. We are so glad to have the chance to spend some time delving into the very important issue of mental health and older adults. While caring for our physical health is so important, and we think about exercise and nutrition, and those things absolutely impact our mental health as well, it's important to take time to think really intentionally about our mental health and our emotional well-being, because that has such an impact on our ability to live life to the fullest and live life the way that we choose. You think as we age, as older adults, we have many joys that come with aging, leaving the workforce, leaving those pressures behind, welcoming new grandchildren, and then we also have losses. So we can really celebrate the joys, and we also have to think about the losses and how we can integrate them into our lives so that we can have a full picture and age as healthfully as possible. So I am so pleased to welcome Tom Starling, who is the Executive Director of Mental Health MidSouth. He's going to help us delve into this subject. So thank you for spending some time with us today, Tom.
No, thank you. This is great. I appreciate the invitation. And you're right. I mean, there really is no health without mental health.
That is great. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Mental Health America?
Yeah. So my name is Tom Starling. I've been at Mental Health America, or MHA, for about 12 years, almost 12 years. We were formerly known as Mental Health Association, so a lot of people still know us as that after 75 years in the Nashville area. But I always laugh because I started as a chaplain at a children's hospital and then worked with college adults and was a singles minister, and then started working at McKendree Village and then the Alzheimer's Association. So my parents said, well, I guess your next job you're going to be a mortician because you keep getting older. And I'm like, no, now it's Mental Health America, and from the womb to the tomb, we serve people with mental health needs, thoughts, concerns, diagnosis, referrals, and you know, that's about me. But I will say, when it comes to Mental Health America, you know, we're all familiar with the Heart Association or the Cancer Society or the Kidney Foundation, and MHA is very similar to those organizations. You wouldn't call the Heart Association for a heart surgeon, but you would call Mental Health America for referrals, support, programs, education, information, you know, what works, what doesn't, support groups. And just as there are many different types of cancers, you know, Mental Health America, we're about advocating for the full continuum of care, from children to adults, from suicide to Alzheimer's. To me, that's why I like Mental Health America. They're about prevention, early intervention, advocating for integrated treatment, and of course recovery as the goal.
That's great. And at FiftyForward, we've had the chance to collaborate with some of your aging specialists, and that has been so wonderful as we've helped families especially manage some of the mental health challenges for their loved ones. So how do you think about mental health and mental illness? You know, how would you describe those concepts?
Yeah, so I'm not a clinician,
Okay.
and I always thought mental illnesses were something you either had or you just thanked God you did not have. And what I've learned is that when soldiers come back from war, when a woman gives birth to a baby, when teens are bullied into suicide ideation, you know, if somebody gets divorced or gets fired, I mean, there's a lot of toxic stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. And what I've learned is that there's just this continuum that we're constantly on. And that just as you would take care of your physical body, you really need to take care of your mental health as well. You need a vacation, a sabbatical, socialization, exercise, faith. I think that there's a lot that comes into play with good mental health. And unfortunately, this thing that I carry around in my pocket, this is like, I don't know why they call it social media. It's almost anti-social. You know, this is very divisive and very individualistic. And so I really encourage people, to socialize too for good mental health.
Right. No, that is great. And I can see, right, you have thought about all the life stages and the different ways that mental health and technology, we think a lot about technology and how it can enhance socialization if people can't be together, but then for some people it really becomes something that they rely on at the cost of really talking to people. Right. Well, thank you. That helps us to frame the idea of mental health and mental illness. So you have had so much experience working with people through the lifespan. Is it normal to become more depressed or more anxious as you get older? Is Alzheimer's an inevitability for folks as we age?
Yeah, those are really good questions because we find that a lot. I will say, of course, Alzheimer's is a disease. And while it's only one form of dementia, it actually is the most popular cause of dementia, but it's not normal. It really is a disease. So even if you are genetically predisposed to Alzheimer's, there are things like your nutrition, your exercise, the stress you have in your life. Those are the things that could really start kind of triggering that. So even if you're genetically predisposed to it, you aren't necessarily going to have Alzheimer's disease if you are healthy. Similarly, depression. I'm asked that a lot. I do think that as we get older, we're attending more funerals, we're losing more friends, there's more chronic loneliness. There are some things there that cause depression, and but it again, it's an illness. It's real. I do want people to realize that because I think it's easy to discount depression or anxiety, but it's very real and it's very treatable. But I think, again, with good exercise, socialization, those are things that aren't just preventers, but those are treatments for those types of things. And then, of course, you get into some other great treatments like massage therapy, medication, counseling, group counseling, anything like that. It's all evidence-based, so why not try it?
Right, I agree. A lot of the work that we do with individuals and families is to recognize what your reality might be, but then not to just accept it, not to think, my mother is 90 and we just lost my father, so her path through life now is going to be a depressed person. So we really encourage people to give each other the time to mourn losses, but then to look at interventions that you can use to manage some of that and make your life as joyful as possible. And it's interesting, we've done a lot of looking at Alzheimer's as well, and I think it's fascinating that you can look at folks after death, when it's the only time we can really know if it was Alzheimer's, and see some people who didn't really exhibit signs of memory loss that impacted their day-to-day life, and some folks that did, and a lot of it comes down to how engaged they were, how active they were, how much they sort of kept their cognition sharp. And so a lot of our programs look at how we can help people maximize, whatever your baseline might be, we can help you be as happy, as cognitively engaged as possible. So
and that's important, Gretchen. And I hope that everybody's hearing this, because one of the referrals that we often make is not just to counselors and therapists, but to organizations like FiftyForward who have programming to keep people engaged, keep them mentally healthy, keep them socialized, teach them new skills. And I think that that's just as important for your mental health as is any type of antidepressant or therapy.
That's great, thank you. So we are filming right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are appropriately distanced and we wore our masks before we came in. COVID-19 is a time when older adults are especially impacted because they tend to have more pre-existing conditions that could result in worse outcomes if they do have COVID-19. So there's a lot of advice out there for older adults to stay in as much as possible, and what we're finding is that increased isolation has its own dangers for older adults. So can you please talk about the risks related to social isolation and maybe give some advice on how we can care for our mental health during the pandemic when we can't do some of the things that used to be really helpful to us?
I did mention the chronic loneliness, and that's a real thing, and not just for older adults right now during COVID, but even rural residents and people across Tennessee, and frankly, even among people in school. So we get calls from students talking about just their loneliness, and I think that friendship is just such a well, they say it's connectedness. So it doesn't really matter if it's a faith community or a family member or a spouse, but connectedness is so important. And when you don't have that connectedness, there are ways to reach out. There are opportunities like making a phone call. It might be better if you could see the person and do something like Zoom or a webinar. There's opportunities to learn to cook differently, to learning new hobbies. Gardening is great, but right now we're talking in November.
Yes, right.
So
Yeah.
maybe instead of gardening, maybe it's skipping that step and going straight to cooking. Or, we all talk about how we could be better technologically savvy, and there are courses, there's free courses online. So I would really encourage folks that whatever that connectedness looks like, if it's having your church come and visit you, which they're always great to do, if it's having 50Forward, do some virtual, programming. I just think that any type of connectedness that you can do during this time is important. Even if it's going to the Humane Society, they're
great.
empty right now. There's hardly any dogs and cats out there.
Right, that's
but
great.
that type of connectedness is really important. So just kind of think in terms of, don't think in terms of your routine is broken or your, 50Forward is closed during this time, but kind of just think in terms of connectedness with your family, friends, faith community, support groups, and the more you could be connected, it is going to be better.
Those are great suggestions, and I like when you talk about cooking, it makes me think, if people can look at what brought them joy, that maybe they did with others, can they still find a way to do those things that brought them joy, but just differently so that they can stay safe? And you're right, 50Forward, when the pandemic began, we closed to in-person, in-center services, and quickly went into a model with phone calls, because this is a generation that does enjoy talking on the phone, which some generations do not, and then safe front yard visits. So that has been really helpful, and again, with the weather changing, that'll be something we'll have to figure out about, but such a benefit of 50Forward has been bringing people together, and so all of us are called upon to just look a little differently at how we can do that and stay safe at this time.
I love that. I walk around the block and I do see people in their front yard or on their porch saying, "Hey, young man, how are you?" And we just start up a conversation. I'm getting to know my neighbors, so whatever can work.
Yep, that's awesome. Thank you. We're also heading into the holiday season, which is a time that comes with its stresses and its joys as well. So what advice would you have on how to minimize toxic stress, depression, anxiety as we add the holidays into the situation we're in now?
Without focusing on COVID and how that's interplaying too, I will say that the tips I usually get are skip the mall parking, go to a boutique store. Focus on things like the scent of pine needles that are going to be in your house, or the scent of fresh bread, and photo albums and memories. I think that that's going to be more important than any material gifts that we give to one another. If you do other gift shopping, you can order it online, have it delivered for free. But I think that during the holiday, it's really all about having realistic expectations. I feel like a lot of people end up saying after the holidays, "Boy, I didn't handle that right," or "This wasn't as good as I remember," or you might even see your son or daughter or a parent who is not doing as well because you haven't seen them in a while. In fact, most of the calls we get at Mental Health America, it's not during the holidays, it's right after the holidays. Because then too, it's like, what's the next thing to look forward to? You've had Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, and now there's, what's around the corner? Yeah, April 15th, tax day, So be having realistic expectations going in and set some boundaries for yourself. And if at all possible, do take this time to think of others. I think that anything you can do to get your eyes off of yourself and to lower the expectations for yourself, but to serve others, you're going to have a better holiday season. That's what it's all about anyway, right?
I agree, right. It really ties into all you've said, which is looking at connections, and connections are the way to bring fullness to life. And I agree, I talk to so many older adults that they're not looking anymore for the tangible gift, they're looking for an experience or some time, because I think you do think about how busy your children might be who are in that sandwich generation, and all you want is to have time to talk with them. So you're right, instead of running to the mall, which is challenging to begin with, maybe just decide you're going to set aside time and play games. And I love what you said about focus on the scents, the baking and the fir trees and things. I love that.
The photo albums, just
Yep.
the lights, the scents, the memories. And those things are ultimately going to, make you a little happier than the stress of Christmas shopping.
Right. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Tom. So thank you so much, Tom, for coming and talking with us today. I'm so glad that we had a chance to focus on this area and think about some of the challenges that if we planfully address them, even when we think about the holidays, if we think about what we don't want to miss, because we don't want to think on January 5th, dang, I meant to do this. So this idea of thinking, being intentional, recognizing that we all have struggles around our mental illness that can ebb and flow. So thanks for helping us to think about mental health and mental wellness so that we can reach out for support and connection and live our best lives.
Yeah.
We really appreciate that.
And I want to thank you too, Gretchen. And if anybody needs us, I think we're going to put the contact information on the screen, but we're at www.mhamidSouth.org, or our phone number is 615-269-5355. Or you could just contact Gretchen. She'll put you in touch with us.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Tom, and thank you to everyone for joining us for this 50 Forward Exchange. We look forward to seeing you next time.